The man is horrified to discover that he has been forgotten on Mars for 108 days. In order to get in touch with the Earth's Space Center, the man finally found the Pathfinder buried in a sandstorm, which was launched by scientists in 1997 as a landing probe on Mars and now abandoned in the sand. As soon as Paul dug him up, the crew at the Earth Space Center detected an unusual fluctuation in the Martian signal, and now none of them had realized that Paul had survived the superstorm more than 100 days earlier. Then the crew curiously turned the camera in front of Paul's eyes because Mars is 65 million kilometers from Earth and it takes more than 30 minutes to transmit data. And Paul knew that people on Earth were probably looking at the data, so he couldn't wait to get his writing pad ready and nail it to the ground. When the staff received the images from Mars, they were all shocked and overwhelmed when they saw the message written by Paul, who had been missing for more than 100 days. They did not realize that Paul was still alive. Thus, a complete exchange of information was carried out between the two parties using hexadecimal, and the entire space agency was watching the conversation in real time. However, Paul got some bad news. He would have to live on Mars for 4 years until a new mission could be launched to bring him back to Earth. So the space agency decided to build a rocket to send Paul supplies, but that will take a year. But luckily for Paul, he's now able to cultivate crops on Mars that will help him overcome his food shortage for a short time. But then something unfortunate happened. Due to the sudden pressure inside the capsule, there was a violent explosion, and Paul was not only seriously injured but all the crops he had planted died. The space agency was forced to speed up the construction of the Mars supplies and send them out before they could even be tested by scientists. But the rocket hadn't even been in flight for long when it exploded violently in midair. Apparently, NASA's anxiety caused the shipment to fail, and if they had taken the time to build a new rocket, Paul would have starved to death. So the manager of the team's program secretly contacted the astronauts returning to Earth from Mars to tell them that Paul was still alive. The team leader and his teammates decided to disobey orders and return to Mars to bring Paul back, but the consequences of doing so would have resulted in the loss of all astronauts in space. After careful calculations by the scientists, there was not enough fuel for the spacecraft to enter the orbit of Mars, so Paul had to use the vehicle on the ground to find the crew. But in order for the vehicle to break through to Mars, Paul had to lighten the interior of the vehicle by 5,000 kilograms and he had to remove the doors and windshields little by little in order to dock with the spacecraft above him in a convertible. It was an impossible task, as Paul was expected to die before he even left the planet, but it was the only way he could get off the planet. And so it was that Paul, with the eyes of the world upon him and his teammates, traveled a great deal of time to the skies above Mars, while Paul flew up into space in a rudimentary vehicle to make the impossible docking with the spaceship.